So you want to build a Porsche Cayenne. What do you need to be aware of? What sort of packages do you need for your use? Are you going to be mostly off-roading it, mostly daily driving? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. And what parts you need to just get started on the modification journey as far as bigger wheels and tires and a lift kit. So I'm going to run through the cars and what packages I think are really cool and that you could look out for, but not that you don't necessarily need them. So the Cayenne range is from 2004 to 2006. Those are the 955 generation. So they have the rounder headlights and a snubbier front end. And then 08 to 2010 for the 957 of the first generation, which is the facelift. Neither or is better, but people tend to prefer the 09 to 2010 because those are more reliable, and supposedly Porsche did something to prevent bore scoring. Not that it is really preventable. So starting on the 04 turbo, this one in particular has upgraded turbos and an off-road tech package. So the off-road tech package is something that you don't really need. If you've seen my videos before, I've never had off-road tech package. I've never had rear lockers in any of the cars that I've off-roaded with. So you don't actually need that unless you're gonna be doing crazy shit. You can kind of power through everything or just use underbody protection to get through most obstacles that you're gonna be doing. This one has the off-road tech package, so rear locker, disconnectable sway bar, and then also the aluminum sliders from the factory. The aluminum sliders from the factory, I think, are the best sliders out there, better than any aftermarket solution right now. So if you're gonna go sliders, you need to buy those. For the 06 Cayenne Turbo S, this one comes with some really slick packages like rear climate control, which is not necessary. You don't need that, and you actually don't want that if you're gonna be off-roading with 33 to 35 inch tires, because you have to try and relocate coolant lines back there, because there's actually 4 to 6 coolant lines, rather than with a non-rear AC car has 2 coolant lines in the driver's wheel well. And it's not realistic to try and get those out of the way if you're gonna be running a bigger tire. So just don't buy a car with rear AC if you wanna run 33s to 35s. This one also has dual pane insulated glass. Another package that this car has that I've never seen another one is paint matched interior AC vents. I haven't seen that before. This one has it. Turbo to Turbo S, there's not a huge difference, at least on the 955s. The Turbo S and 955 is a little bit limited. They only made it in 06, and there's supposedly 600 ever made. Real numbers are probably closer to 1,300 total. Slightly more horsepower, which comes from the solid aluminum or fully aluminum intercoolers, not even a bigger intake hose or anything, and just a different tune. But realistically, no differences unless someone optioned this with a carbon fiber package on the inside, which I think was only available in the Turbo S, but I've seen no 06s with that option. And also the price difference from a Turbo S to a Turbo maybe isn't worthwhile, though right now they're pretty close. You might find a Turbo S in better condition than you find a Turbo in, but if you're looking at bringing a trailer, they're all gonna be in pretty decent condition. For this 06 Turbo S right here, this is actually probably the most exclusive, might not look like it, and most rare 06 Turbo S that exists. To my knowledge, this has the Webasto gasoline preheater. So whenever you're going out to your car or something, you can turn that on. And there's a heater in the driver's wheel well that actually circulates heat throughout the entire cab, and it warms it up for you to just get in and drive. This also has dual pane glass. This has the off-road tech package. And another super rare feature that you won't find on every Cayenne, all the rest of these have sunroofs. It was basically a standard option for the Cayenne to have a sunroof. So to option a $133,000 car from the factory and to choose not to get a sunroof is crazy. Pretty standard on the inside. The wood on the steering wheel was a $1,500 option, but if you get a wood steering wheel versus an all leather one, the all leather one has heated in the steering wheel. The wooden one does not. With the off-road tech package, at least in the 955s, you'll have a button that looks like this on the center console. They got rid of that on the 957s, and underneath here, right here, it would just say PDCC. So brake size. On a base Cayenne, you're able to fit a 16-inch rim over. I can't specify which 16-inch rims, but it's possible on those because they're 17Z calipers. On the S's and GTS's and turbos, typically, unless you have 2-piece rotors on your car, those are gonna be 18Z calipers, and you can fit a 17-inch wheel over those. Most 17-inch wheels. On the Turbo S brakes, they are 380 millimeter rotors, and the smallest you can fit is an 18-inch wheel. And also, I've fit every 18-inch wheel that I've tried over these. It usually just comes down to how large the face of the wheel is and how concave it is before it starts going out to the barrel. So lower offset, probably better if you're trying to fit an 18-inch over the Turbo S brakes. Or you can downsize to the 18Zs from the S, GTS, or turbos. If you are going to modify a car, what I prefer to start with is a Cayenne S with no rear AC, no air suspension. It can be either a 955 or a 957 because you get the V8 power, 400 horsepower, preferably without parking sensors, without the pano roof, just as basic as it gets. And you can build on that. You can put coilovers on. You can kind of do whatever you want to the car without having to have things coded out like air suspension and really diving in. And like, then you kind of either have to know someone or go to the Porsche dealership to have them code out air suspension or whatever else is on the car that's unnecessary. If you're gonna off-road, majority off-road use, you're gonna wanna start with the Cayenne S. But if you're gonna go majority on-road use and it's gonna be like your daily driver and stuff, and you're fine working on it, you're fine taking it to the dealer for a service occasionally or something that you can't fix in your backyard, you'll probably be pretty okay with the turbo. If you wanna keep it more on the budget side, a Cayenne S or a base. I have never owned a base. I've heard reliability is pretty good. It's the VR6 that's pretty much in most Volkswagens at this point. Parts are easy to find everywhere. Parts are not hard to find for these cars overall. You have people like Pelican Parts, or you have FCP Euro that can take care of like any needs that you have. Turbos are usually harder to work on, and they're more prone to being like annoying to work with because you can get vacuum leaks that are hard to diagnose, or you have to like smoke test a lot of things. There's a lot more vacuum lines on them, and there's so many more things in the way when you actually go to work on stuff or change spark plugs, or like if you were to change the engine mounts on a turbo, you actually have to pull the entire engine out, whereas you can actually get to that on a Cayenne S, but it's still really tedious, long job. An issue that I dealt with on this Cayenne that I haven't dealt with on another one, notice I've put 100,000 miles on Cayenne S's and I've probably put 20,000 miles on Cayenne Turbos total. On this one, I've had to deal with an issue that very few people have to deal with, but it's something that can happen on any Cayenne. The steering lock module in this stopped working. So when you turn your key off, your steering lock module will tell the car that it's off and it'll lock it. That way nobody can actually steal the car or something. But if your steering lock module malfunctions while you're driving, there's a possibility that it would lock and stay straight. So the Cayenne disables itself completely. Like after you shut the key off, after that happens to you, you can't turn the car on, you can't do anything. You have to put it manually in neutral. You have to take off the steering lock module to like get it to turn. And you have to send that off and pay like $600. I'll include a link in the description to the guy you would send it to. That actually kept this car down for a month. Half of that was me not pulling it in time, but then I sent it off and received it back, malfunctioned, had to send it back again, but I couldn't drive the car for a month and I was living out of it at the time. So because of that, my recommendation is if you're gonna be going far off the beaten path, driving into another country, driving into somewhere that you could be stranded with absolutely no help, or having to like pay a tow truck driver thousands of dollars, do that preventatively if you have a time that the car can be down. Send off your steering lock module to have an emulator installed and remove the possibility of that ever happening to you totally. Plastic coolant pipes are something you have to deal with on basically any Cayenne that's been untouched from the factory. And in the valley of this one, there's a straight tube that goes through. The majority of those are plastic. It's something I think was addressed in 09, 2010s. On the 955s though, you have several coolant lines that run through the valley. They're all part of each other. Those are made out of plastic. Switch those to aluminum, but then on the turbos, you can also deal with the coolant tees behind the driver's side of the head. You have to replace those with aluminum. Those are plastic. If your coolant ever bubbles or boils, the force of the boiling inside of there will just bust those after they're old enough. And by now, they're almost all old enough. This one here is an 09 Turbo S. They made Turbo S's in 09 and 2010, and 2006, of course. I don't know how many models there were total, how many of these they built, but this one is 550 horsepower from the factory. This one's totally stock. This one will be getting a 3-inch lift and 33-inch tires with some 18-inch Alpha beadlock wheels. That one over here, the silver one, is going to be getting 33-inch tires, 17-inch wheels, and a 2-inch lift kit from Eurowise. So the 09 Turbo S, not typical, but this one came with the same style seats as the GTS. There's the normal seats. There's comfort seats, which have like a split down the middle, a split in the center of the bottom seat too. But these are the sport seats. Mostly these came in the GTSs. Tan leather, super nice, but can reflect poorly on the dash against the windscreen. This one has PDCC. Most turbos and Turbo S's, I would say, generally have PDCC. So it's not a rare option. This one, no rear locker though. Shortly, we'll talk about some of the modifications that have gone in the cars. Over here, I've got the Pink Pig with a front runner roof rack. On the black car over there, I have a Sherpa roof rack currently. There's not a wrong way to go, but my favorite is the front runner rack because it actually mounts to the rails in all points. And this one I have 6 different mounts on it, ends and middle. Over here, the Sherpa, there are 4 mounts to the roof rails or the roof gutters. So there's one here, and then their front mount actually is just a pad that rests on top of the roof. I wish they would redesign this because if you're carrying a heavy load up here and you're doing anything rowdy off-road, there's a good chance that amount of weight is going to shift forward and you're actually going to dent your roof panel. They say that that's fine. I don't really agree with that. I'd rather not have a dented roof panel, or if it's sliding around or weight shifting for too long, you're going to scratch and remove the paint underneath there. That's an issue that I dealt with on the first Eurowise rack. The V2 first edition roof rack had a fairing with like a rubber mount on the front, and eventually, after making contact with the paint for so long, that rubbed all the way through the paint and actually put a divot in the metal, which I then had to like sand out and repaint. Another package that is really cool on the Cayennes that doesn't come on a lot of them, on the 09 2010 Turbo S's, I think most of them actually came with the fender flares, but on the earlier 955s, it's called an appearance package. It's like PT1 or something, and there's PT2. PT2 comes with the aluminum sliders, the off-road tech package, and a couple more things, but there's different levels of the PT2. But the PT1 is an off-road appearance package, which is mostly like fender flares, aluminum front, aluminum rear, and just kind of like looks. But those fender flares you can actually buy. You can buy those and the aluminum sliders from Suncoast Porsche, or reach out to Ryan DeToro. He's the contact there. He's the guy that can get you all set up or point you to a local dealer if necessary. Suncoast Porsche though, go in there, buy it, goes right to your door. Don't have to deal with any Porsche dealerships, nothing. I've actually installed those. I pulled these off a junkyard car and I cut them to the appropriate lengths. In the back, I didn't have to modify them, but in the front, because I cut the front bumper really high on this one to accommodate for the Baja style front bumper, that's gonna set you back like $1,100, or just get a car with it. If you wanna start with a GTS, cool. Those come standard with air suspension, which you can either delete unless it has PDCC. If a car has PDCC, you don't wanna delete the air suspension because it is tedious. There are not a lot of people that have made that work. Like I only know of one person, maybe 2 that have actually claimed to have deleted PDCC entirely, but there's hydraulic lines, there's a valve block in the passenger wheel well, there's all sorts of stuff you have to consider when you want to get rid of that. So Cayenne S versus Turbo. Cayenne S, again, better for off-road, better if you're going to put 35-inch tires on it because they don't have intercoolers and they usually don't have the second row AC. So you're free to have all of this cut out, removed, whatever you want. On a Turbo, you either have to move the intercoolers forward, or like on the Pink Pig, I bought aftermarket intercoolers that moved several inches forward, got them out of the way, but otherwise there's deep intercooler brackets or regular intercooler brackets from Eurowise that'll set those forward so you can get a larger tire on there. The biggest you can realistically do without moving your intercoolers forward is about a 31-inch tire. And even then you might be pushing it depending on wheel offset. But the perfect tire size for a Cayenne, intercoolers moved, or Cayenne S is a 33-inch tire because you only have to trim the back of the rocker panel and massage your fender liner front, or like cut off the bottom, move that forward, but you don't have to touch the rear at all. Probably the best tire size is a 31 to 32 inch if you're gonna be daily driving. Probably an AT tire so you can keep the noise down. MTs I've never really had an issue with because Cayennes are pretty well insulated and you don't have to worry about that much. So if this is a daily driver, probably a 2-inch lift, maybe 3-inch lift. 3 inch is a little more involved. We'll take a look at that in a second. But a 2-inch lift, 32-inch tire, and you're gonna have a really solid daily driver. What affects miles per gallon most on the Cayennes that I've found, like I've run with 35-inch tires on this car without a roof rack and I was getting 14 to 15 miles per gallon. The minute you put a roof rack on top, ruins aerodynamics and you go down to about 12 to 13. So you can do bigger wheels and tires. That's gonna affect your miles per gallon most. What's up here? A few years ago when I started with the Cayenne stuff, there were only like 3 or 4 wheel options out there. And now there's tons. Like a lot of companies have come out with 5x130 wheels. And I think it's like a 72 millimeter bore on the hub size for hub centric. But we've got a few different options here. I've got these fast HRE wheels that came on the Silver Arrow. This one's like 700 horsepower. It's pretty insane the way they built it. These are 5x130, but you would never want these for off-roading because those are 22-inch wheels. I've got 18-inch braid wheels over here. These are beadlock A's. Beadlock A's, so full wheel beadlock, not DOT, legal DOT approved. I've never been stopped, never been hassled. Right here, I've got Alpha beadlock wheels. I bought these because I got them for a deal. I think Alpha is actually going out of business, so they wanted to liquidate the rest of their sets. These I bought for like $300 a wheel, which normally any beadlock is going to cost you a lot more. So I was fortunate enough to buy these. I think Eurowise still has quite a few sets if you're in the market and you need to buy wheels for your car. I've had issues with Alpha in the past where I've bent a few, but that's when I've been like off-roading at like 10 PSI, going very hard over rocks. I would bend barrels and I actually cracked a couple. But I'm willing to put these on a car that is not going to see crazy off-roading. These wheels right here are 1552s. They're going in the Silver Arrow, and I actually downgraded the brakes from that. That had a $9,000 set of Brembo GT brakes and calipers, and I put normal turbo brakes on those so I could fit a 17-inch wheel. These are going to go perfect with a 33-inch tire. 33-inch tires, again, are the best size for Cayennes. I run 12.5 just because it's the easiest size to find. It's more common than like an 11.5 wide. So I'm super excited to get all these tires on here, and then we can talk about lift kits. So lift kits now. If you have an air suspension car, this is really going to apply. I have a 3-inch lift kit over here and a 2-inch lift kit over here. The 2-inch lift kit is currently missing these. I'm waiting on these in the mail. And also sway bar end links. Sway bar end links are going to be important, especially if you're going with a bit of a lift and you have PDCC, or it's important that you keep your sway bar end links or your sway bars and you want the car to handle well still. These are going on the 09 Turbo S. I chose a 3-inch lift kit. It is a bit more involved. There's a lot more hardware plus subframe drops, so it's not quite as easy to install. So with the 3-inch lift kit, this is exactly how I would spec out the lift that you're going to put on your Cayenne. So it's important you get the sway bar end links. You get the subframe drop, the hardware with those things. These are to raise the front aluminum cradles on the front suspension. And then these are the rear cradle spacers, which are 2 inches. And that's going to bring down the rear suspension instead of adding something to the shock to lengthen it. And you've also got strut extension hardware for the fronts. That's going to go with these. The intercooler relocation brackets. So these move them forward a couple inches to get them out of the way of your bigger tires. Another really important piece that didn't exist when I first started doing Cayenne stuff. So if you're going to do any lift kit or any modification to your Cayenne and you're planning on off-roading it, subframe centering sleeves are super important, because once you adjust your alignment, Porsche from the factory gave a little bit of space around the subframe bolts so they could shift your subframe. Not that they ever do this, not that anyone at the dealer ever does this, but shift your subframe for a more precise alignment. And if you're off-roading, braking at high speed, doing whatever, your subframe can shift around and just ruins your alignment. There was like a 5-month period where I maybe had 10 alignments, and I was so tired of paying for them. Something important, but not super important, are the rocker chop plates. So after you trim your rockers for bigger tires, I've left mine open for literal years. Like, it's all galvanized steel. I've never had an issue with rust, at least being out here in Utah on the cars. You can weld these in if you'd like. It's not like it prevents water from getting inside of the cab. It just prevents dirt from getting stuck in your rocker, but also just like stick a pressure washer in there, spray it out if you need to. So something I'm using now for the second time is the Baja bar on the front of the Cayenne. This one's gonna go on the Turbo S just to put lights on there. So I'm putting these Project X lights on top of it. Those are gonna run. I'm just gonna have the 4, probably won't run ditch lights or anything. Eurowise offers a couple different options with this. One raised section and just the Baja, or if you just want lights on the front, I think they also do that. So there are a few different control arm options that you're gonna go with on your Cayenne. If you're 2-inch lift kit or less, you're probably gonna stick with the stock stuff just because you don't have to worry about the rubber wearing out as quick. You don't have to worry about noisy spherical bearings or having to replace those frequently. And especially if you're running air suspension or anything but coilovers, you're not gonna have enough room around there to remove the bolts that hold the upper control arm in. So you have to go in, drop the whole cradle, and it just becomes a much longer job to replace or service the bearings in these. There are a couple different control arm options out there. So you've got the stock ones, you've got these from Eurowise, you have another one with a fixed point in here. These are adjustable camber plates, so you can move the wheel further in or out. And then on the Black Cayenne and on the Pink Pig, I have 2 more options. So here we've got the Berg Peaks control arm. I have one of the first sets of these arms, but the way that I have my suspension set up, I've almost over traveled the joint, and because of that, I ended up ripping the rubber covering over the ball joint on here underneath, which you can't see. In here are fully sealed like spherical joints, so you don't really have to worry about wearing those out. I have not taken mine off to check if they are still good. I've probably put 10 to 15,000 miles on these arms. And another issue, if you're gonna go with 35-inch tires, 9-inch wide, 25 offset, you're gonna have some issues if you're adjusting for properly for camber, because I have dealt with my tire rubbing the control arm. So I have to run a little more positive camber than I would like. So a good option if you're gonna be running 33s, not so great if you're gonna be running 35s. And over here, we've got the Eurowise billet control arms. These are new. Not a lot of people are actually running these yet. On top, there's an actual like sealed cap. But if you remove that, dirt and dust can still make it in from the bottom going up, but they're easy to grease, easy to take care of. In the back, you have spherical bearings, which can wear out and will make noise over time. But these are if you're gonna be mostly off-road and you're actually gonna like take care of this and you're fine servicing that every 15,000 miles, let's say. So those are the kind of components you want to think about. We can also take a look at some of the suspension stuff that's on the black Cayenne right here, because I'm using locked off-road coilovers, 8-inch travel front and rear. I'm using Eurowise billet links for toe arms. I had an issue recently where I bumped the rock with the toe arms because they used to go straight across, and now they're billet arms that kind of want up and over. I used to have a diff skid on this. I've got control arm skids from Eurowise. I've got gas tank skids, I've got a front skid and a trans skid. So all of those, protect the undercarriage as much as possible. The Eurowise sliders, they're a decent option if you're not gonna be off-roading hard. If you're gonna be off-roading hard, the best option right now is OEM. These look good, they look cool, they're they are metal sliders, but they will dent and bend easy if you do like thrash on the car or set it on rocks frequently. They're just not gonna hold up. And you also deal with the possibility of denting. You push that up into your rocker, and you'll still bend and dent your rocker with the metal sliders pushing up. The locked 2.5-inch reservoir shocks, I have seal savers on there right now to protect dirt and dust from getting on the shaft and ruining the seal of the shock. Custom clevises made by Eurowise right there. And then up top, also more steel brackets made by Eurowise to mount the shocks properly. On the subframe, I actually deleted my subframe bushings, thanks to Alex Fishburne for helping me weld in plates on top and bottom with the sleeve through, because if you don't maintain this properly or you don't keep an eye on this, if your bushings tear, your subframe will actually fall out from underneath the car and like dig into the ground. If you are moving very quickly, that would be a huge issue and would probably total out the car. Maintenance related things, the torque arms on these cars will fail pretty quickly. There's just rubber bushings on this side and this side. Eurowise sells a polyurethane bushing, like milled aluminum piece. PCV, you have to replace that sometimes if you're getting some oil consumption or oil blow by. Somewhat easy to diagnose based on crankcase, ventilation, or vacuum. So if you open this up and you hear a bunch of noise that you're not supposed to, it's possible your PCV is bad or you have a vacuum leak somewhere. Water pump and everything in the valley, replace that all at the same time. If you have plastic pipes or you have a coolant leak underneath, just go through the water pump, go through the pulley. Buy an aluminum water pump pulley also. FCP doesn't sell it, but another company does. If you Google it, you can find it. There's not too much that goes wrong on these, except bore scoring. Bore scoring is the death sentence. And if that happens on your car, you're out a bit of money, basically, because you can sell the car as is. Try not to screw anyone if your car does have bore scoring. And if you are buying a car, I would really recommend borescoping it before purchase, just to make sure the cylinder walls aren't scratched and it's not eating a ton of oil. I think I close this all the way. Nope. All right. For air suspension cars, the only way you're going to be able to tell if the car is in good condition, well, at least suspension-wise, is if the air shocks don't leak. And the only way you're going to be able to tell if they don't leak is if you test drive the car, let it sit at your house overnight, if you were to buy it from a dealer or something. But usually there's not too much that goes wrong on the air suspension. With air suspension cars, it's not the worst thing if there is a leak in the air suspension. The only way you're going to be able to tell that when you're buying one is if you let it sit at your house overnight or for a couple days and it starts to go flat either in the front or rear or maybe all four. But based on where it's going flat, you can kind of diagnose your issue. Most of the time, it would be a leaky O-ring on top of the shock, which does require a bit of disassembly. If you were to pay a shop, it would be a couple hours of labor So probably nearly $1,000. But if you do it at home by yourself, it's not hard. You don't need any crazy tools. And it's a $5 O-ring. You can usually tell if your shocks are blown based on the condition of the outside of the shock. If like the xylophone around the bottom of it is like completely missing, there's a good chance you should just replace the entire shock. The air compressors can go bad over time. If you hear yours start to not work very well, that can be an issue. Or your valve block can actually like develop some leaks. The valve block's like $350. You can find an air compressor for like $650. Shocks you can get for pretty cheap each through like Pelican or FCP. You can buy aftermarket ones. Really not too big of a deal if there are leaks or your suspension is having an issue. And you can kind of just spray like some Dawn dish soap in a spray bottle around to find where bubbles are coming from, and you'll find your leak. Just replace whatever that is and you'll probably be pretty okay. For aftermarket lighting, if you're gonna use a controller for those, there's a couple different companies like S-Pod, which I have not used. Then you have Project X, they have a ghost box, and then there's trigger controllers. So all of those are Bluetooth remotes that you run your wires from your lights to those, and they usually have the fuses, circuit breakers, whatever inside of those to deal with whatever power you're running. And then you just use a controller that you wire to a power source, or with the trigger, you don't need a power source inside. You just have a remote that you change the batteries on. So that way you don't have to pass through the firewall. But if you are gonna pass through the firewall, there's a spot right back here where the steering shaft goes through. There's a rubber O-ring. You can go pass through that down into the driver's footwell and then clean it up whatever you can, put silicone on it to seal it back up. Not the hardest to run wiring through, but I try to avoid going through the firewall as much as possible, just because I don't want leaks. So there's a couple different companies out there that make aftermarket parts for the Cayennes so far. There is Eurowise, which is gonna be the one that sells basically everything you can find for these cars. There is SMP Fab, also selling bumpers for Dirt Rich Motorworks. And then there's Simple Performance and PRG Products. There's a couple different roof rack options like Front Runner. There's Sherpa, there's Eurowise. Suspension, that you have a PRG lift, or there's HRG, which started as like selling Acura lift kits and stuff. And then there's Eurowise. Eurowise, I think best customer service by far. A regular lift kit is basically just a block of aluminum on these cars going over whatever shock. So you can't really fuck that up. When modifying the exhaust on a Cayenne, there's a couple different setups you can go with. This one has a Fab Speed rear muffler, but on the turbos, you can do primary high flow catalytic converters and a secondary cat delete from Fab Speed. I don't know of anyone else that does catalytic converter deletes or anything. So primarily Fab Speed products, they are expensive, but if you want to make your vehicle sound different from cats all the way back, that's kind of your only option. You can go with a muffler delete on the Cayenne S's, but also the turbos. On the turbos, you want to go with an H pipe or an X pipe to drastically like change the difference of the sound, because if you don't do an H pipe or an X pipe, the turbos tend to sound like Harley Davidsons at full throttle or wide open throttle. The Cayenne S's, just with a muffler delete, they sound super loud and also really good. You can hear those in a couple of my other videos, but with the side exits, I think this is the best way to do it. I think they're 2.5 inch or 4.5 inch mini T's from Dirt Scum with like eBay exhaust tips. You can buy the exhaust tips from Dirt Scum, but they are more expensive. 2.5 inch to 4 inch tip with 4.5 inch mini T's. And that's the best side exit setup. And just from the rear diff, a lot of people chop it off back there, but just have those go straight up and out the sides. And that's the best to get them out of the way of rocks. A couple different rear tire setup options are rigged. Eurowise makes their own. And then you have the OEM spare tire option on the Cayennes, which is incredibly rare. Good luck finding one. Also good luck finding a car with the off-road tech package. You're looking at like 1 in 200 for the tech package, probably 1 in 1,000 for the spare tire on the back. And that one you can only fit like a 32 inch tire back there. So this right here is the Eurowise dual swing out tire carrier. They don't make a single swing out or anything, but the dual swing out is nice. And it leaves you enough room back here where if you wanted to mount a table or put more accessories, you could. There's also spots for them where you would just use carriage bolts on the other side. Over here, I've got 2 gas tanks from Rotopacks and a front runner water jug. There's room for a high lift jack, but I would never use a high lift jack with a Cayenne. There just are not tough enough spots to lift by. But enough room, all of it's really well designed, so you can open the hatch without having to worry about any of it scraping. With this, I wouldn't go bigger than a 33 inch tire, otherwise it would likely contact the tailgate when you open it. There are a couple different rear storage options for the Cayenne. So you have the front runner drawer set, which is actually really nice. Basically full aluminum, pulls out really well, but kind of, you know, a little bit messy once you get things in here, and it takes up a lot of room. There are mounts on top, so you can put different accessories. I mounted a power tank straight to the top, and you also, if you remove the sides, you've got some storage back here. Aside from the front runner setup, some 957s at least that I've seen, I had it before in a turbo, but there's like a rail set or clamp sets that go to different extrusions in the back. Super rare, don't see them in a lot of cars, but if you have that, cool. I'm sure it's fun to use sometimes. And then there's also aluminum 80-20 or 40-40 or 20-40 bars that go across, and Eurowise has made, you know, adaptations to the stock mounting locations or the strap points in the trunk. With the turbos again, with the intercoolers, if you're gonna go to a bigger tire size, if you're going above a 33-inch tire on the turbos, you probably want to get rid of your intercoolers entirely and go to a front mount setup. So instead of side to side, you'll have enough clearance for all the turning you ever wanna do. But if you go with the front mount intercooler setup, you then probably don't have enough room for a winch in front of that. There is someone in Panama who mounted a winch in front of his intercooler, so he has a lot going on up there, but he's also now on 37-inch tires. I'll link his profile in the description too. No one's really done crazy stuff. There's the Minted Cayenne on Instagram. He's built a long travel setup and he's getting that perfected so that he can actually race with the car. I know of a solid axle front and rear vehicle that's using I-beams or whatever K-beams from a Ford Ranger. They're adapting that to a Cayenne. And then there is another one that's supposed to race in like King of the Hammers or Ultra 4 with solid axle front and rear. So a couple LS swaps out there. Nothing completed, nothing actually driving around. There's also a V10 Touareg TDI getting front and rear solid axle swapped. So I'll include their profiles if you're interested in following them. And as more stuff comes out, I hope to make that publicly, you know, known on my Instagram and stuff. So we're gonna do sound clips for each Cayenne. This one, high flow primary cats, secondary cat delete from Fab Speed, and a rear muffler delete. I'll be doing side pipes on this one soon. Silver Arrow. Fab Speed high flow rear muffler, or Fab Speed rear muffler, it's like $2,500. Fab Speed secondary bypass cats. Turbo S, totally stock, just as it came from the factory. Cayenne S, just a muffler delete. And the Turbo S, which is an 06 with a 4.5, this one's a 4.8, both stock exhausts. So none of these are cold starts because the cars have been parked here for a few hours, but I don't think you're gonna get the high revs right off the bat when I start it. Sounds much crazier than stock at all. Why does that happen? What could that even be from? That's like old car shit. Good for stock. So also, if you're going to modify the exterior of the Cayennes, you're going to erase or get rid of the bottom part right here, at least when you install 33 to 35-inch tires. You can remove these right here, but then you deal with still having the rubber piece underneath. 957s came with this only, and 955s did not come with those pieces. So if you go to a junkyard or you find a Cayenne 955, same as your 957, same color, or even have it painted, but you can swap these pretty easily and erase that rubber part, you know, totally. That's what I've done on 2 Cayennes now, and I would prefer it that way, just because when you lift these, that piece looks dumb. I apologize if this came across scatterbrained at all. It's just hard to put 3 years of knowledge and working on the vehicles, driving them around, maintaining them while on the road, and living out of them full time. into a single video. So I've tried organizing this as the best as I could. If there's a question that I did not answer, feel free to comment that down below. And also there are plenty of Facebook groups out there. Those are the best place to go to actually talk to other Cayenne owners, or if you're considering doing this, or if you already do this and you're not aware. Off-Road Vag in Porsche, or there's Eurowise Community Facebook group. There's quite a few out there. If you search for them, you'll find them. I'm providing as much knowledge as I can, and I hope this helps you out. Please like, share, subscribe. Thank you guys so much for following along.